All right, we are in chapter 6 and 7 of the book of Esther, and we're going to see some interesting things take place at this dinner that Esther gets the king and Haman to come to. So let's go ahead and jump into chapter 6, if we can. Here we go. That night, the king couldn't sleep, and he had a servant read him the records of what had happened since he had been king. And when the servant read how Mordecai had kept Bigthana and Teresh from killing the king asked, "What has been done to reward Mordecai for this?" "Nothing, your majesty," the king's servant replied. About this time, Haman came in to ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on the tower he had built. Well, the king saw him and asked, "Who is that man waiting in front of the throne room?" The king's servant answered, "Your majesty, it is Haman." "Well, have him come in," the king commanded. When Haman entered the room, the king asked him, "What should I do for a man I want to honor?" Haman was sure that he was the one the king wanted to honor. So he replied, "Your majesty, if you wish to honor a man, have someone bring him one of your own robes and one of your own horses with a fancy headdress. Have one of your highest officials place your robe on this man and lead him through the streets on your horse, while someone shouts, 'This is how the king honors a man.'" The king replied, "Hurry and do just what you have said. Don't forget a thing. Get the robe and the horse for Mordecai the Jew, who is on duty at the palace gate." Haman got the king's robe and put it on Mordecai. He led him through the city on the horse and shouted as he went, "This is how the king honors a man." Afterwards, Mordecai returned to his duties at the palace gate, and Haman hurried home, hiding his face in shame. Haman told his wife and friends what had happened, and then his wife and advisors said, "If Mordecai is a Jew, then he is just the beginning of your troubles. You will end up a ruined man." They were still talking when the king's servants came and quickly took Haman to the dinner that Esther had prepared. The king and Haman were dining with Esther and drinking wine during the second dinner, when the king again said, "Esther, what can I do for you? Just ask, and I will give you as much as half of my kingdom." Esther answered, "Your majesty, if you really care for me and are willing to help, you can save me and my people. That's what I really want, because a reward has been promised to anyone who kills my people. Your majesty, if we were merely going to be sold as slaves, I would not have bothered you." "Who would dare to do such a thing?" the king asked. Esther replied, "That evil Haman is the one out to get us." Haman was terrified as he looked at the king and the queen. The king was so angry that he got up, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. Haman realized that the king had already decided what to do with him, and he stayed and begged Esther to save his life. And just as the king came back into the room, Haman got down on his knees beside Esther, who was lying on the couch, and the king shouted, "Now you're even trying to rape my queen here in my own palace?" As soon as the king said this, his servants covered Haman's head. Then Harbona, one of the king's personal servants, said, "Your majesty, Haman built a tower 75 feet high beside his house so he could hang Mordecai on it. And Mordecai is the very one who spoke up and saved your life. Hang Haman from this own tower," the king commanded. Right away, Haman was hanged on the tower he had built to hang Mordecai. The king calmed down. So a couple of short chapters there. Jewish tradition says, there's a Jewish writing that says the angel Gabriel pushed Haman on to Queen Esther just as King Xerxes was coming into the room. Now, again, that's just mythical Jewish writing, but to think that angels would have a hand in dealing with some of the things that we do on earth is kind of interesting to think about, but I don't think that was the case. I think Haman was probably pleading for mercy. It was just bad timing on his part. So here's what we need to understand. King Xerxes could have read from any book, from any page, from any paragraph, from any sentence, but he didn't. his eyes fell on the story of Mordecai saving his life. The littlest things that we do in life might make the biggest difference. So don't take any of your actions for granted, any of your attitudes, anything that you do, don't take them for granted. If this shows us anything, it is that God is involved in everything. Things don't happen by luck. God's in the midst of it all. Now, you might think that the book is over. Esther has won, or Mordecai has won, but no, there's still more that the king has to deal with because of what he has already agreed to do. And we will finish up the book of Esther next time. Have a great day.